Ever since the release of World of Warcraft in 2004, there has been a million different questions about areas discovered within the zones of the game, many of them being answered by being a feature in future expansions. Some, however, were left and even to this day remain a mystery. After 20 long years, the mystery of the rumoured mega dungeon underneath Karazhan has finally been released for Season of Discovery, and it has definitely lived up to expectations. It has taken the form of a heroic style dungeon with a 24-hour lockout from future expansions, and in return has added difficulty and some extremely good loot. It also comes with new dungeon and more retail-like mechanics, but still being within a classic setting. We'll touch more on this in a second, because before we can enter the crypts, in true classic fashion, there is an attunement. Luckily, they hit a decent balance of the attunement being short enough to not be a total pain, looking at you Onyxia, and having depth and reasoning behind the attunement. You are sent to various places around the world to assemble a very unique torch, after grabbing a Flame of Life, an ancient ironwood branch, and an enthusiastic wisp. You will then be provided with a magical torch which is used to dispel the darkness around the crypts and granting you attunement to the dungeon. Once you enter the dungeon, you are shrouded with darkness, which while in the darkness you take constant damage, become untargetable and unseeable by party members, and unable to see enemies that are lurking within the darkness. This is a brand new mechanic to Classic, and to navigate the crypts you'll need to pick up the magical torch that you created during the attunement, which is at the start of the dungeon. Only one party member at any given time can hold the torch, and this torch will follow the torch wielder, so you'll have to make sure you stay close. All throughout the dungeon is hidden secrets, such as the random encrypted text that requires some enchanting material to decipher, which will then leave a interactable scroll on the ground for all enchanters to learn new formulas. Or maybe you find a blighted apparition, presumably looking over his disease-ridden corpse, which when the corpse is cleansed, will cause the apparition to buff the entire party with a short 10% increased damage and healing buff for 15 minutes before fading into the darkness. You will also come across these sort of burning patches that when you approach them with the light, turn out to be a withering plant, and if you're lucky enough to have a herbalist, or presumably a student of nature, which I think refers to druids, then interacting with the plant will restore the plant, granting the area of blossoming starlight. That not only will act as a source of light, just like the torch, but also will turn the area above the plant into a beautiful sea of stars. There is just so many different secrets within the crypts that it takes multiple runs of the dungeon to experience them all. Which leads us on to the bosses in this place. Which again, to experience every boss within the crypts, you'll need to run the dungeon multiple times, as there is around a total of 12 bosses, but some of them are shared between a few different events. Such as the Opera event, which if you played during the Burning Crusade and done the actual Karazhan raid itself, you'd recognise this as something very similar that reminds you that you are indeed in a part of Karazhan. Though this feels a lot more like an underground, more horrific and demented opera event, which really is fitting to the theme of the crypts. Just like the Karazhan opera event, you'll face off against typical well-known fairy tales with a twist. There is at least one exception though, with there being a kind of goblin council fight, which is similar to many other council fights or PvP-esque fights throughout World of Warcraft, with different mobs all using different deadly abilities that are the same or very similar to player abilities. While traversing through the crypts, make sure you keep an eye out for relics that look like weapons, as when you gather enough of these relics and place them in their respective locations later, we'll summon a Dark Rider boss. All of the bosses within the crypts completely suit the theme of the dungeon, which really gives you a sense and feeling that you're in more of a raid than a dungeon. Some of the bosses can definitely be a real challenge too, especially if you're experiencing the dungeon for the first time. I don't want to spoil too much if you haven't done the dungeon yet. There are a ton more secrets, bosses and hidden triggers within the Karazhan Crypts for you to experience, and I highly recommend giving the dungeon a go if you haven't done so already. I am really impressed with what Blizzard has done with the Karazhan Crypts, and honestly, it's one of the most fun dungeons I have ever done within the classic trilogy. It's one of the most fun things to have been added to Season of Discovery so far, and this is what everyone was waiting for and expecting within Season of Discovery. Completely new content with new mechanics, time spent actually on developing a cool place while all still being within a classic World of Warcraft setting. I personally am really excited to see what's coming up next, especially knowing that the Scarlet Raid is being worked on, and if they had hit the nail on the head with this Karazhan Crypts dungeon, I have high hopes for what they are cooking for an actual Scarlet Raid. Good shit, Blizzard. This is probably the most impressive part of Season of Discovery since Phase 1, and if you're still watching this and quit Season of Discovery, then I really encourage you to jump back onto SOD and at least give the Karazhan Crypts a try. I'd love to know what you all think of this phase of Season of Discovery with the Crypts and the new content that is upcoming. Thank you all for watching, and Blizzard, don't forget, Legendary Ashbringer.